Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Jacqui Van Ham, your girl in the know for all things motorcycle. Welcome to your Fun Fact Friday. Welcome back to today's show, everybody. Your end of the week Fun Fact Friday program. You know, I like to try to keep it interesting, keep it a little spicy out here, and bring you some fun facts that you may or may not be familiar with about some of these motorcycles that we all know and love. Thank you for tuning in. If you saw the title page for today's show, it is called DuckTales, because today we are going to be talking about a brand that is well known and respected and beloved and has been in the news a little bit lately, and that is our friends over at Ducati. And this time of year, especially for me, it's super gloomy and kind of gray and poopy out, and nothing brings me more lightness and lightheartedness than these beautiful, dead, sexy, gorgeous Italian motorcycles. They bring me such joy. So I figured it would just be fun to go ahead and look through some pictures of Ducati bikes and talk about them a little bit on today's show. As always, I can see your comments as we get going on along, so feel free to peek in and say, hey, Dan Lentz, I love you too. Welcome back. Hey Hans from Sweden, what's going on out there? Randy Russell, thanks for tuning in. One of our top fans out there. Welcome back. So, if you have anybody that you is on your friends list that is a fan of Ducati, make sure you go ahead, tag them in this post, hit that share button. They are not going to want to miss it. So let's get started with today's show. So obviously, as I just mentioned, today's show is going to be all about the DuckTales. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's going to be a Ducati. So this incredible brand was founded before World War II. However, in their beginning days, they were manufacturing radio parts and electronics. That's what they were known for. They did not make the pivot over to manufacturing motorcycles until after World War II. In 1926, Ducati was founded in Bologna and produced vacuum tubes, condensers, and other radio components. They kept in production until World War II. World War II, their factory was repeatedly bombed and was destroyed. However, they managed to rebuild and got themselves back together. At the same time, a company called Seata had started producing an engine called the Cucciolo. Cucciolo meaning small puppy. Well, this engine took off in the mid-1940s, post-World War II, took off like gangbusters. This Cucciolo was a small engine that was meant to be mounted into bicycles, and they could not even keep up with demand. That it was super, super hot and heavy, as you can imagine if you think about it. And one of the things I love about Fun Fact Friday, and talk about the history of any of these motorcycles, is how they absolutely, their stories are woven into the stories of world history as well. So if you think about what was going on post-World War II in Central Europe, a lot of that area was completely just bombed to the ground. The roads were in terrible condition. The economies for a lot of countries were in terrible condition. People didn't have money. The roads were crummy, but people still had to get around. So are they going to go out and buy cars? No, of course not. They couldn't afford cars. So this is why you see a lot of companies and a lot of development post-World War II is because they had to get hip to the skip and start making super accessible and affordable and relatively reliable transportation for the masses, which is the whole bread and butter of why Ducati started. So the slide on your screen is a great vintage advertisement for this awesome little Cucciolo engine. In 1950, after more than 200,000 Cucciolos had been sold, in collaboration with the company Seata, the Ducati firm finally offered its own Cucciolo-based motorcycle. This first Ducati motorcycle was a 48cc bike weighing 98 pounds with a top speed of 40 miles per hour. And there it is on your screen. These are some of the very beginnings of Ducati. These are the very earliest Cucciolos. So as you can see, it literally is a bicycle with an engine in it. You know, it couldn't be any more simple, any more straightforward than that. However, it does have a light attached to it, which is quite nice, increasing its usability. Another great shot of a beautiful little Cucciolo made by Ducati. When the market moved towards larger motorcycles, Ducati management decided to respond, making an impression at an early 1952 Milan show, introducing their 65 TS cycle and a cruiser. Not like you and I think about a cruiser, but a cruiser, a 4-stroke motor scooter. Despite being described as the most interesting new machine at the 1952 show, the Cruiser was not a great success, and only a few thousand were made over a 2-year period before the model ceased production. That is that 175 Cruiser on your screen. Super, super interesting, trippy, weird design. The 1950s was all about pushing boundaries, doing weird stuff, doing odd stuff, as well as, again, really starting to latch on to this movement that also happened with scooters in the 1950s because, again, people needed mass transportation that was clean. So you'll see a lot of enclosed, a lot of fully faired, a lot of fairings on the front. That way they could keep their clothes, their dress clothes clean. You see a big push, a big uprising of motorcycles and scooters that start looking that way in the 1950s. However, this model was not successful, and only a couple thousand of that Cruiser, which I think is really interesting that it was called that, this Cruiser was made. What else? And in 1953, management split the company into 2 separate entities, Ducati Mechanica and Ducati Electronics. So they separated out. Ducati Mechanica SPA has increased production at that time. In the 1960s, Ducati earns its place in motorcycling history by producing the fastest 250cc road bike then available, the Mach 1. Now brace yourself, because look at this sex bomb right here. This is the Ducati Mach 1. I love this bike. To me, this is just the beginnings of the actual real Ducati. To me, it is dead sexy. It has that beautiful styling to it. Very, very classic Italian look going on. I love that bike. Again, that is the Mach 1 that was made in the 1960s. But in my mind, the heyday for Ducati, when styling to me hit like peak Ducatiness, is the 1970s. The bikes were just absolute stunners. The bikes got larger and larger. Displacement bloomed and boomed, especially within Ducati, but all across the board. This is the very beginnings. This is the boom period of the super bike era. So this is when you're starting to see 750cc displacement, 900cc displacement becoming much and much more common. However, because it's Ducati, it's got to be like these dead sexy bikes, sparkle paint, exotic colors, pinstriping, interesting new freshened up logos and typography on all of these bikes. Just absolutely incredible machines. These are going to be your 1970s Ducati. That is a 750 SS, and then a 900 SS is on the screen right now. This era of Ducati, this late 1970s, is also Mike the Bike. Mike Halewood won the Isle of Man TT on a Ducati. This beautiful picture right now, that is Mike the Bike on his original Ducati sport race machine. This is from the Isle of Man. However, many Mike Halewood replicas have been produced based off of that original bike. The original is on display at the museum. But this is going to be the era of Mike the Bike, Ducati, winning races, the TT, these gorgeous 1970s super sports, the super bike era, just beautiful peak Italian design in my mind for Ducati. However, and also part of the 70s is when Ducati began producing larger displacement V-twin motorcycles. So I also do want to take a second and point out, while you can see the engine on the slide, that is a V-twin engine. However, it's considered an L-twin because of its positioning, but that is a V-twin. So if you were thinking V-twin is only in the realm of Harley-Davidson and Indian motorcycle, you would be wrong. This is also considered a V-twin, although it's technically an L-twin. In 1985, Ducati ended up being bought by a company called Cagiva. So this is kind of an interesting period in time for Ducati. The styling became very different. Right now, the Cagiva year bikes are becoming a little bit more collectible. They are considered a little bit of an ugly duckling for Ducati. As you can see, it's kind of a jump to go from that to that. So these are going to be kind of some growing pains years for the Italian folks. However, they needed new ownership. They were struggling. They did have to sell. So they did sell to Cagiva. Again, 11 years later in 1996, Cagiva accepted an offer from Texas Pacific Group and sold a 51% stake in the company for $325 million. In 1998, Texas Pacific Group snapped up the remaining 49% to become the sole owner of Ducati. In 1999, Texas Pacific Group issued an initial public offering of Ducati stock and renamed the company Ducati Motor Holding SPA. TPG, Texas Pacific Group, sold over 65% of its shares in Ducati, leaving TPG the majority shareholder. In December 2005, Ducati returned to Italian ownership with the sale of TPG's stake minus one share to Invest Industrial Holdings, the investment fund of Carlo and Andrea Bonomi. So this is going to be in 2005 is when finally things kind of started shifting back to focusing back again on the home turf, being branded and being part of like Italian culture again. So there's a little bit of again, like a 20 plus year time in there when design was a little weird, but this is also when there was a lot of development going on in Ducati. I didn't have, it would take all day to talk all about Ducati and all of their developments, so I'm going to go kind of quickly through it, but let's just fast forward to a little bit more current modern day Ducati. In 2012, Audi and Volkswagen announced its intention to buy Ducati. They did go ahead and pick it up. Ducati chairman is a motorcycle enthusiast. He had long coveted Ducati and had regretted that he passed up the opportunity to buy the company from the Italian government in 1984. So that's why this all happened, is they were part of Italian government and Cagiva bailed them out basically in 1985. So I thought that this was really interesting, and this is still to this day, this brings us up to almost current day Ducati. So modern Ducati still is owned and has been owned by Volkswagen, which is also Audi, which is also Lamborghini now, and Ducati. They're all under the same parent group umbrella. But the bike that I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about modern day Ducati is this bike that's on your screen right now. This is the absolutely iconic Ducati Monster. And this is a really, really interesting machine for Ducati because this came to be in 1993. This bike has been considered since 1993 to be the bike that saved Ducati. They sold well over 300,000 of these bikes, I believe. It's either 200,000 or 300,000 of these have been produced. I was right. 300,000 of these Ducati Monsters have been produced. And they did really, in a way, bail Ducati out. When this bike was designed in 1993, it was purposely meant to be a naked bike that because they'd been on this path of super sport bikes for so long, they were trying to fish with a little bit different bait, and they were trying to specifically fish to the American market. So they knew they wanted to do a reasonably priced kind of a naked bike for them that still had an aggressive vibe like their super sport bikes and like their sport bikes do, but with a little bit more appeal to a little bit more mass consumer. When this bike first came out, this was absolutely considered a parts bin bike. This was slapped together of a lot of different leftovers. Now that's not to talk smack, because this was designed by a really great designer. Miguel Galuzzi ended up designing this, and he's super, everybody now considers him a genius for coming up with this bike, especially with the iconic trellis frame. That brings me to 2021. When Ducati got rid of the trellis frame on the Monster. So that's right. So the bike going forward, leaving 2020 and heading into 2021, they've redesigned this machine. Now, it was to make weight loss happen. They got rid of the trellis front frame and a couple of other things and ended up dropping, I think, like 40 pounds off of the bike, which is cool. But in my mind, is it a Monster if it doesn't have the trellis frame? I don't know. But anyway, I just want to take a second and show you that bike on the screen, because in 1993, this bike was absolutely considered to save Ducati's bacon. And this bike on the screen has also been considered the more recent version of that Monster. It is the Ducati Scrambler. And I say more recent version of the Monster because it also has been considered to save Ducati's bacon. This Ducati Scrambler, they are very, very careful to separate them out in all of their corporate language. It is Ducati, and Ducati Scrambler, and they are considered two very separate things. That being said, this very, very reasonably priced kind of entry-level-ish Ducati Scrambler took off like gangbusters. It sold great, and it is also considered one of the bikes that has saved Ducati. And so for that, it gets my applause today, and it's considered a pretty iconic machine in the Ducati lineup. So what's going on for Ducati now? Well, like I said, they axed and got rid of and redesigned the Monster. The Trellis is no more. The Scrambler is still going on hot and heavy. Speaking of things that are going on hot and heavy, the Ducati Museum also has a fantastic website. It is the Ducati Museum online journey. You can click on over to Ducati Museum website, and you can go and basically tour virtually the entire museum in Bologna, because currently us Americans can't go there ourselves right now. So you can do that online. They are also hosting, I think twice a week, it's €10, and they're doing a live tour through, and that means since it's live, you can communicate and ask questions. So I think that that's a really cool, neat thing. It's €10 to go check that out, or you can go do kind of the general broad overview of the museum for free over on their website. Now, why also have they been in the news today? Well, something weird is going on over here in Ducati North America, because their headquarters were just raided by the FBI in December. Their headquarters are based in Northern California, just outside of San Francisco. Nobody is discussing what is going on right now. It is an open and pending case, so no one can talk about it. But indeed, the headquarters were raided and gone through, as well as, I believe, the homes of the top corporate bodies that work at that office. So something is amiss. Something is afoot here in Ducati North America. We're all going to have to stay tuned for more information about what's going on over there. I'm very, very curious, but all that being said, Ducati Italy also just released that they've had the best 6-month patch of sales I think that they've ever had. That just came out in the past several days as well. So they're doing well. They're keeping on along. They're still fighting rumors that they might be for sale any day now. It's always the drama over at Ducati, but do you expect anything less from this absolutely beautiful and incredible and very, very Italian brand? I do not. I always expect drama. I always expect beautiful, gorgeous, dead sexy machines that sometimes can be a little fussy. But that is the Ducati legacy. That is why we love them, and that is why I wanted to talk about them a little bit today. There certainly is something going on over there, and it has been going on since the 1940s, and that's our friends over at Ducati. So what did you guys think about that? What did you think about today's show? Kind of some interesting stories about Ducati. Were you aware of all of this history and all of this drama that is going on currently with our friends over at Ducati? They, of course, are also looking forward to another excellent MotoGP season. So they have that going on as well, and their incredible sales and their beautiful bikes. And what's not to love? I wanted to give them a little bit of a love letter today, and feel a little bit of that La Dolce Vita. So I hope that you are having a La Dolce Vita no matter where you are out there in the world. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great weekend no matter where you are out there. Feel free to peek in and say hey to me in the comments. I always go back through and come say hello to you and answer your questions. Thanks as always for tuning in, clicking, liking, and sharing my videos. I super appreciate you guys. I love you guys very much. Have an excellent weekend. Stay safe, stay warm. It's super, super cold and yucky here, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for my show partner for the past year, for 2020, Vroom Your Room, Vroom Retract Vac. It totally sucks, and it's supposed to. TwoStrokeTees.com, free shipping in the US. And thank you so much to my Choppertown Nation. Zach Kaufman over here, the big boss, always looking out for me, always taking care of me and helping me put together these excellent shows for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, and I will see you next week.